Thank you. Good evening and buonasera. Welcome. Quote, entering a novel is like going on a climb in the mountains. You have to learn the rhythms of respiration, acquire the pace. Otherwise, you stop right away. Now, you'll notice that in that quotation, our guest, Umberto Eco, uses the term entering a novel, not reading a novel, but entering. And it's most appropriate, because when you start an Umberto Eco novel, you are indeed entering something. A new, strange, often unexplored, sometimes threatening, often hilarious world. And you do indeed have to adjust your rhythms of respiration. For decades, he has dazzled millions of readers with daring leaps of language and narrative within the literary imagination. He was 48 when he wrote his first novel, The Name of the Rose, and he wrote it, he said, because I felt like poisoning a monk. It became an immediate international phenomenon, selling more than 20 million copies. Mr. Eco was born in the city of Alessandria in the Piedmont region of Italy. Ignoring his father's advice to become a lawyer, he decided instead to study medieval philosophy and literature at the University of Turin. He said he developed a passion for the Middle Ages the way some people develop a passion for coconuts. He also began a lifelong study of modern media and symbolism, and he's one of the world's leading semioticians. His latest novel, The Prague Cemetery, is a darkly comic and hypnotic examination of hate, pure and simple. Let me correct that. There is nothing in the novel that is pure and simple. His central character is despicable, without any obvious saving human qualities, but at the same time, he's one of the most interesting characters in recent literature. The Prague Cemetery has already become a bestseller in Europe and is sure to do the same in North America. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Umberto Eco. Welcome. Thank you for coming, joining us tonight. Before we talk about the book and literature and so on, I want to ask you something quite off topic. The recent death of Steve Jobs reminded me of an essay you wrote back in the 90s, in which you said that the Apple, the Mac, was Catholic, and the PC was Protestant.
Yes. It was before
what did you
Windows.
Mean?
It was before Windows.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Oh, I'm glad. Yes.
Because Windows is Anglican.
Oh, it's
a Church of England. A Church of England. Half Catholic and half.
How is Apple Catholic? And be careful how you tread.
It was Catholic in the sense in which it was counter-reformist. Everything is clear by paintings and tells people what to think, what to believe, while PC at the time in which you had still to make your program with the basic, you were in a private relationship with the Bible. You had to make a personal interpretation, and so it was not so easy. It was not so collective, the feeling. Everybody had a personal relations with Bill Gates instead of God.
But my concern is which operating system guaranteed your entrance into heaven?
Or into hell.
Or hell, yes, yes.
Which sometimes is the same.
You said that in the writing of the Prague Cemetery, you wanted to write about, you wanted to create, I guess, the most hateful character in literature. This was what you set out to do.
Yes, it
Why?
was very, very naive, because then reflecting upon that, I must say that a colleague of mine, Shakespeare, did his best in creating Richard III, Iago, and the fagging of Dickens was not so bad. So I am not alone. You know, Simone Simonini is a forger that, among other things, creates in my novel, the protocols of
the Elders of
Science.
He's a terrible man.
He's a racist, full-fledged racist, not only anti-Semite, anti-German, anti-French, anti-Italian, anti-women, and so. Maneuvering, using such a dirty material as all the racist cliché, I had to keep the reader and myself maybe far away from the character. So I had to create a totally and recognizably negative character. The fact that then, once started this endeavor, a narrator feels that the taste and the pleasure of making his character more and more repugnant, okay, that's is unavoidable.
Is it more, I don't know if the fun is the right word, is it more interesting to you to create a character of absolute evil rather than one of absolute good?
No. In my novel, I had very nice characters that I love and with whom I could identify myself. No. But in this case, I had to create a bad guy. Okay.
He's a virulent anti-Semite,
yes,
and has never met a Jew.
No. As many of racists
Dreams about them.
Dreams about. He is the grandchild of a allegedly historical character, the grandfather Simonini, who was, so to speak, the creator of all the set of cliché of the 19th century anti-Semitism, right, with a letter he wrote to the Abbot Baruele. Nobody knows if that Simonini really existed and whether even that letter was a forgery. But in any case, it was published and republished and widely circulated, not only in public, but in the secret services, the Vatican, the secret police of Napoleon III. And so it influenced the 19th century anti-Semitism. So my Simonini, who is the grandchild, receives, being practically an orphan because the mother died and the father was a hero of the Risorgimento, always away to fight for the... So he lived under the oppressive shadow of this reactionary grandfather who was imbued with those ideas, even though he never met a real Jew, except Dr. Freud once in Paris.
It is a novel, and yet, when it was published, certainly when it was published in Italy, the chief rabbi of Rome, the Vatican newspaper, L'Osservatore Romano, criticized you, saying that you might taint readers with the scourging brush of anti-Semitism.
Yes, nobody pronounces such a word as anti-Semitism. In both cases, they said, even considering the good intentions of the author, there is the risk. But they were two different attitudes. The Osservatore Romano was shocked by the fact that the Jesuits and the Pope Leon XIII play a very painful role in this story, because they committed a lot of mistakes, in the case of Leo Taxil, and the Osservatore Romano at that time was one of the big anti-Semite. So, since they couldn't react defending the Pope, they tried to say, you are disturbing the Jews. So, the fact that the Osservatore Romano, in order to defend the Jesuit, plays the pro-Jews is an interesting case.
What about the chief rabbi, though?
No, that's another. Before before publishing the book, I wanted 10 Jewish friends of mine to read it in order to have advice, to see if, in fact, one of them said, oh, for the Jews, no problem. I think that the Jesuits will be upset. But they have the same initial, so sometimes. And they had this meeting with the chief rabbi, who, in fact, he loved the book, but he expressed a preoccupation. I would say, if I were the chief rabbi of Rome, probably I would express the same preoccupation. That can be weak readers that can take seriously all those cliches. My objection at that time was, but these people, if they push a button on internet, they can find all this every day without the control of an author. But the good objection came from another rabbi in Rome and from the director of the Shoah Museum. They said, for a stupid politically correctness, we try not to mention any longer those cliches because it's so vulgar. And so we are ignoring and making people to ignore that they are still there circulating. So it's important to spell them aloud.
But
it was the real objection that seems to me, and one of those people said that the book should be read in the schools in order to understand what racism is.
But in Foucault's Pendulum, one of your characters said, be careful about kidding people or fooling people. They might believe you.
Yes, certainly.
Is that a concern?
You are not responsible of the perversion of your readers. You know, Thomas Merton, an eminent Catholic thinker, became Benedictine monk. You know how? By reading James Joyce's The Portrait of an Artist, which is the story of an apostasy.
That's right.
So you see, everything can happen. So somebody can read Thomas Merton and commit apostasy and become an atheist. It depends on the rate of perversion of your reading, because there is a way to respect a text. You cannot say that the Bible encourages the killing of his own brother only because it tells the story of Cain. And there was an interesting review in the States last week who said, but at that point we should say that it's dangerous to read the James Bond novel because you can become like Blofeld or Dr. No.
The villains, yes. Yes. You were raised Catholic, and then you drifted away when you were in university, I take it. Did you abandon the church, or did the church, do you feel, abandon you? Was there some?
But both.
Both?
Both, because I was one of the members of a Catholic organization. I was one of the national people directly. And at a certain point, we were charged with excessive leftism.
Excessive
leftism, and so it was the
That's
church.
Quite virulent.
It was it was the church to kick us off, and then step by step, I abandoned the church by working on St. Thomas Aquinas, like Thomas Merton.
That was your first. You get
my
your PhD
my dissertation.
Thomas Aquinas.
Yes, because being historically correct at every point of the research, in which I loved my hero, and I still love him, but I put him in his exact historical landscape, and it was there, not here. And right. It was correct to do like that in order to understand an author, to understand him or her as belonging to a certain historical time and period. If not, you commit certain sandwich operations that are always erroneous. Okay, but this is an old story. Anyway, I am still very, very linked to all these people, medieval people from St. Augustine to St. Thomas, who were very brilliant.
But you've written, in some of your essays, you've written extensively about religion, the role of religion. And at one point you said that we think we live in a skeptical age, when in fact we live in an age of extraordinary credulity, that we believe everything, almost.
There is this sentence of Chesterton that I like very much. Chesterton was a believer, obviously, and he said, when people do not believe any longer in God, it is not that they believe in nothing, they believe in everything, everything. So the more the religions, the great religions decline, the more sects, new wave situations, Satanism, so they grow up.
Is that because we're gullible or we're afraid?
But because human beings need some form of credulity always in order to survive.
In reading the novel, in reading Prague Cemetery, the reader goes through a catalog of evil, the protocols, the attacks.
Yes, because Simonini not only makes that forgery, but many others.
And it goes after Dreyfus.
And he kills some people and so on and so forth, for money.
But in the course of the journey through the novel, every once in a while you stop and describe an extraordinary meal. You give like almost a recipe about why do you bring food into...
But that was a strange... We spoke about perverse reading, and I provoked a perverse reading. It was a mistake on my part. I exaggerated in giving food to Simonini as a substitute for sex, because it has no sexual activity except at the end, but we will not reveal the trap.
I certainly won't. No.
And I gave him food instead of sex, and I wanted to disgust the reader, because each of those recipes is fantastic, because I worked on the texts of the 19th century of the real hotel and restaurant, so they are all real recipes. Each of them is probably fantastic. All of them is a nightmare, But what for me was only flatus vocis, a sound, the sound of those names. For many
of the ingredients, of the food.
But the name of the recipe, écaille à la bourguignon, typical. Right. For many people, on the contrary, it was a taste appeal. And so they loved it. And it made, against my will, Simonini, at least in this case, a little human. It gave him a passion. Not for ideas, not for human beings, but for food, for animal corpses.
Could there be a possibility of a Captain Simonini's recipe book, do you think?
Yes, but that will go against my will and encourage the perverse reading.
Of course.
So you can do that. Me,
that's right,
I cannot.
Are there any heroes in Prague Cemetery?
Any?
Heroes. Good guys.
There are two pure persons. They are killed. One is Ippolito Nievo, the Italian poet, who really died mysteriously. And so mysteriously that I was free to invent that Simonini was the one who killed him, because he was protecting certain secrets of the Garibaldi expedition and so on and so forth. And the poor Maurice Joly, who was, without knowing, one of the inspirators of the protocols, because when the London Times demonstrated that the protocols were a fake, demonstrated by showing that many pages of the protocols were copied by this book of Maurice Joly, who was not against the Jews, but against Napoleon III. And one of my discoveries is that Joly, if not copied, he was influenced by a book by a popular novel by Eugène Sue, Le Mystère du Peuple, in which the same arguments are used against the Jesuits. And the Prague Cemetery, of which we will speak, was inspired to a scene of Joseph Balsamo of Alexandre Dumas, in which Cagliostro was plotting, not with the rabbis, but with the Freemasons against the King of France.
All right, that raises an interesting question. With a novelist writing about history, can you just make everything up, or do you have to abide by certain protocols, respecting
You have to respect absolutely the historical truth, because it's always more fictional than fiction. Take a character like Leo Taxil. Many people believe I invented him because they think it was impossible that a man like that really existed.
Explain, yeah.
Leo Taxil is a man who spent his entire life by lying, always. Inventing situation, inventing the sharks on the Gulf of Marseille and moving the French Navy, to inventing a submerged city in the Lake of Geneva, then invented an enormous anti-Catholic series of books that at a certain point he changed his mind and he became Catholic and made an enormous series of books against the Freemasons. Then he pivoted again and he said that he has done that in order to cheat the Catholic, and he became again a Freemason. But every moment, in every page of his immense opus, he was always lying and forging, and with such an ease, such a simplicity that is prodigious. And he existed, and he did exactly.
Did not make him up.
No. Oh, no, unfortunately, I couldn't quote another 1,000 pages of him. We invented the most incredible stories. For instance, that the Freemasons, in order to destroy the world, have a hideaway in the Rock of Gibraltar. They were living...
Nothing.
And people was believing all that. And unfortunately, even the Pope. That's why the Osservatore Romano was so irritated. But once again, I followed the historical truth. You know, when you write an historical novel, you have absolutely to obey the historical truth. No? You cannot say that George Washington spent his vacations in Paris. No. And didn't cross the Potomac, but La Seine. But once respected what we exactly know about the historical character, since the 80% of their life is unknown, because we don't know what they did on Friday. There you can insert the invention, provided your invention matches the psychological feature characteristic.
Has to be credible.
It has to be credible.
At the end of the book, though, I'm not going to give away anything, but in the afterword, you have a section which you've called Useless Learned Explanations. And you say that this is because the plot is so complicated and the characters are there's so many of them. This is a guide, in a sense, to the plot and the characters for readers that are sort of slow on the uptake. Why did you put that in the novel?
Probably I had the model of Stuart Gilbert on Joyce's Ulysses.
Oh, I see.
No.
It's a chart, and you have a little explanation.
I had the impression that at a certain point, the intricate complexity of the flashbacks, flash forwards, and so on and so forth, was requested a terrible effort to the reader, even though one can read the book without that. But when I discovered that me too, I became a victim of the problem. Because since by writing the book, as it happens in the course of 6 years, you decide to move a certain scene now to the chapter 35, but to the chapter. So I cut and pasted. At a certain moment, I lost my and happily, one of my translators, who started to translate immediately before the Italian edition, said, "But you say in the chapter so-and-so that Simone goes in the cellar and finds 3 corpses, but 2 of them are killed later." Oh my God, that's why.
That could be a problem. Yeah. Do you write on a computer?
Yes.
You don't write in longhand, you go right to the computer.
No, sometimes I feel the need to take notes with hands in order to go more slowly. Sometimes I would like to have an obelisk and to carve.
Like the Rosetta Stone or something.
Yes, yeah. Because the computer is obviously more literary than the hand, because it follows the speed of your thought, like in the surrealistic automatic writing. Because then you have not to pay attention even to the errors, because you correct. So you can follow your thought, the freedom of your thought. But sometimes you feel the need to control your thought, and so the handwritten note can be what we have abandoned is the poor typewriter.
The typewriter, yeah.
It was such a marvelous instrument. So his only way to survive is the MoMA, in which there is the Olivetti 22 of the late 50s.
But I was told that you don't own a cell phone. You don't use a cell phone. Is that right?
I use?
A cell phone. A mobile phone.
Yes, but always out.
What do you mean always out?
It's very important, because people believe to reach me and they cannot, because it's out. It's turned off. It's turned off.
Doesn't that defeat the purpose somewhat of having it?
No.
No.
Because it works as an agenda. You take your notes.
But it's supposed to work as a phone.
Yes, but I don't want to receive messages, and I don't want to send messages. At my age, I have deserved the right of not receiving messages. This world is overloaded with messages, and even each of them says nothing.
You wrote a series of essays once in which you went across the United States. You went to Disneyland, and you looked at Disneyland as a kind of series of technologically perfect simulacrums that you said, I think, in one of the essays, that it's trying to teach us that technology can give us more than nature can.
Yes, but I was not the only one to make observations like that. For instance, my old friend now died, Louis Marin, wrote a beautiful essay on Disneyland. In that book, the most original explorations were in all the museums of reproduction. I saw 12 Last Suppers in California. And one in stained windows, another in chalk. I said Venus of Milo with the arms. I said,
toward the arms, yes, yeah.
No, with the arms like that. While if you follow the logic of the shoulders, the arm should be
that's right.
Like that.
But you said to draw inferences from what you're writing in those essays is that we live in a fake culture. Culture is fake, cities are fake, our literature in a sense is
yes and not. I had two problems. One, the model was the fortress of solitude of Superman, in which Superman has all the memories of his life in small format as a fake, as a reproduction.
Right.
And I found that this love for the reproduction of what they cannot have here is a particular aspect of the American culture. Obviously, they cannot have Palazzo Strozzi, and there is in downtown New York a Palazzo Strozzi, complete for the first 4 floors. Then there are 55 more floors that didn't belong to the real Palazzo Strozzi, but at least, so that's typical of the American culture. But at the same time, that inspired me some suspicions about the European notion of authenticity.
Of authenticity.
Of authenticity. Yeah. Because when the myth of authenticity, because when I saw, I don't remember whether in Sarasota, at the Ringling Museum, a Greek sculpture, and it was said that is a modern stone reproduction of a Roman iron statue that was a reproduction of the original stone Greek statue. I realized that many of the Greek statues we have in European Museum were Roman reproductions.
Yeah.
So
right.
Instead of 3 passages, we have only 2 passages,
right.
2 mediations. But sometimes we do consider as real, as original, what is no more original. So it was at the same time a sort of criticism of European culture, so a mixed position.
But isn't that depressing for you? Doesn't that make you...
I am not using fakes. It can be depressing for those who take them.
But you don't. I mean, this is not... You don't think that our entire sort of Western culture, so defined, is crumbling into a kind of series of fake reproductions?
No, because, for instance, internet gives you the Roman statues and the Greek statues such as they are.
Right.
Internet is a return to alphabetic culture, is a return to the original document.
Are you on Facebook?
No, I have not the portable, and I am on Facebook.
Oh, you don't? Right, right.
Sorry.